The CIA document that silenced every UFO witness. David Grusch swore under oath that he'd provided information about alleged crash retrievals to inspectors general, then said he resigned under pressure. Luis Elizondo fought pre-publication review just to use his job title in public, even as the Pentagon disputed his role. These are not hanger stories, they're paper trails. NDAs like SF-312, pre-publication choke points, and clearance language about confidence that doesn't require a courtroom. Now at what's on the record. COINTELPRO's isolation tactics, CIA and DoD influence guidance that teaches friction, and the modern insider risk handbooks that fold wellness into surveillance by another name. Pair that with corporate contracts you can actually read, derivative insight clauses that expand what needs review, liquidated damages that shift harm into accounting, and retention packages with resilience conditions. The tool isn't a single form. It's an ecosystem that looks lawful because every part by itself is. What follows starts with facts we can verify, real testimony, real policies, real documents, and then moves into a composite scenario that illustrates how those mechanisms can operate in practice. We'll label the line between them. One more thing. The most decisive moment for a witness often isn't the signature they remember. It's the off-ledger note they can't see. The one that says continuing evaluation while the dashboards go gray. The contamination, the first contact with silence. This is a composite built from documented mechanisms, public cases, and declassified doctrine. He's mid-career, TS/SCI, a materials engineer at a defense prime. The anomaly isn't lights, it's a lab result. Sample 47BS isotopic ratios refuse to sit inside expected ranges. He runs the checklist, replicate, blind prep, swap columns, recalibrate, verify chain of custody. The signal holds. Stakes, plain and heavy. If the numbers are true, either upstream mislabeled provenance, an instrument is lying in a way it shouldn't, or he's touched an origin he isn't cleared to touch. None of those is casual. He writes a tight methods packet and requests an independent run at a sister lab. No adjectives, just decimals. Then vocabulary changes the room. Instrument access pauses pending portfolio realignment. A new assignment arrives far from isotopes. Email language tilts from science to him. Post-briefing stabilization, route to behavioral review, continuing evaluation. Each phrase is defensible alone. Together, they redirect focus from data to the person holding it. A document slides over as a refresh, not a threat. He already signed SF-312. He knows the edges of classified spill. This one is corporate confidentiality update, derivative insights subject to pre-publication, a resilience acknowledgement. Versions of this exist in public PDFs. They extend review from facts to conclusions about process. He declines and asks for a meeting. Care shows up first. A wellness call lands at home, kind and precise, shift cadence, a clinic visit he didn't share at work, resources for families. Concern feels like custody when it knows your Tuesdays. His spouse says, gently, maybe keep your head down until the refi closes. Pressure priced as prudence, that's how it starts. The supportive assessment is framed as voluntary. Courts don't trust polygraphs. Access decisions use them to inform trust. He sits, answers cleanly, hears the comfort sentence, non-deceptive on relevant questions. He expects his dashboards to light back up. They don't. Security writes, not every assessment generates a primary record. Auxiliary capture supports continuing evaluation. He can request prim. AUX is the lane he can't see. Passing didn't restore anything. It mapped him. Microfrictions appear on a clock. TSA pre-check flips to see agent for the same 3 weeks his portal shows continuing evaluation. A 10-year subscription pings inconclusive identity the day his status updates. A refinance drops from automated to manual underwriting. A careful banker says, your file is fine, something upstream isn't. Upstream is where guidance lives, not verdicts. He stays lawful. Congress carved a path in the 2023 NDA for protected UAP-related disclosures to inspectors general and lawmakers. He files a process-only report, no programs, no numbers, about routing irregularities and expanded review. He gets a receipt. He doesn't get his lab back. Channels safeguard the act. They don't compel restoration. Inside, the culture pivots. Peer feedback starts praising tone awareness and alignment instead of precision. A manager who always asked for plots now asks about mission communication standards. Performance portals collect floating concerns, over-indexed on anomalies, self-aggrandizing. COINTELPRO called this reputational seeding. Insider risk decks call it perception management. The nouns change, the effect didn't. He asks for the exam record to anchor an appeal. The same line. Arrives. Auxiliary capture supports continuing evaluation. No pass/fail in prim, no footing to contest. Off-ledger capture is discovery proof and appeal proof by design. Lawful in parts, lethal in sequence. Across the river, a separate composite drawn from the same mechanisms. An analyst passes clean and still watches live feeds turn into training modules. 2 buildings, 1 cadence. She writes a sentence on a receipt because memory needs handles when records won't. I passed, and the pass mapped me. He starts collecting the beige artifacts that never make headlines. HR's temporary adjustment supports mission assurance. A portal banner reading resilience cadence update. A bank email marked manual validation required. An insurer loop asking verification resubmission needed. Nothing from secure rooms leaves his hands. He writes phrases and dates in a paper notebook because it's the only ledger no one can redact after the fact. Finally, he meets a reporter who understands lines. He doesn't bring spectra. He brings timing. She files narrow public records requests any cautious editor would allow. Hotel invoices around an off-site. Contractor revision logs that add confidence preservation within 90 days of high-visibility briefings. Administrative headers that show behavioral routing without bodies. The denials come back with matching paragraphs and commas across unrelated desks. That's not conspiracy. That's harmonized guidance. Meanwhile, the soft choreography continues. Wellness calls become spouse check-ins. Optional resilience sessions populate calendars. Skip one, and the portal logs opportunity declined. Attend, and it logs engagement. Either way, time turns into telemetry. He learns the adult rule for mortgage years. Solvency is strategy. He takes a lateral that keeps the pension green, says less, and writes one more line that will matter later. Delay is policy when it repeats. The voluntary test that isn't. Refusal sounds noble until you see the invoice. Decline the supportive assessment, and you meet a phrase with no appeal. Loss of confidence. That isn't an accusation, it's an eligibility judgment. Clearances are trust calls, and trust doesn't come with a hearing. He signs the consent form that says voluntary, because in this world voluntary means temperature, not choice. The room follows a rhythm he already knows. Baselines to set a curve. Neutral questions to park the needle. Then the administrative circle. Have you discussed work outside authorized channels? Do you intend to disclose restricted information? He answers cleanly, no and no. The examiner offers the line professionals carry like a talisman, non-deceptive on relevant questions. He walks out expecting dashboards to glow. They don't. What arrives is softer than a verdict and stronger than a suspension. Temporary realignment supports mission assurance. His tickets vanish. Live feeds return as training modules he already passed. He asks for the formal result to anchor his file. Security replies with the sentence he's already seen in different rooms. Not every assessment generates a primary record. Auxiliary capture supports continuing evaluation. Prim is where due process lives. AUX is where recommendations run. We keep this grounded in what's documented. Agencies say polygraphs don't prove truth, they inform trust. Inform is the lever. Inside composite cases like his, the exam's value isn't pass/fail. It's reaction capture, posture, persistence, tone, the insistence curve when pressed. In a system that prices confidence, a map of your insistence is more useful than a banner that says you passed. Declining isn't costless either. Refusal routes as a signal, resistance under stress. That's the paradox. Say no, and you're flagged as difficult. Say yes, and you're profiled as expensive. Either way, AUX spins. That's why voluntary reads like a trap when your mortgage has a clock and your spouse hears the word stability. Parallel cases show the mechanism without guessing intent. Luis Elizondo fought pre-publication review to use his own job title, while internal notes framed it as mission communication standards. Different channel, same structure. Credentials turned into discretionary gates. David Grusch testified to Congress under oath about protected disclosures to inspectors general, then told press he resigned under pressure. Formal findings are rare. Climate does most of the work. After the exam, the cadence tightens. A wellness call lands within 48 hours, voice soft, details sharp. Shift pattern, last clinic visit, spouse's first name. Care that knows your Tuesdays feels like custody. Peer portals grow phrases that float above output. Tone awareness, alignment, over-indexed on anomalies. Ask for examples, get overall perception. Perception is gravity. Swim against it, and you look defensive. Drift and you disappear. He tries to pin one thing to paper. He requests the prim entry. The answer repeats. AUX supports continuing evaluation. Off-ledger capture is the point. Discovery resistant, appeal proof, fast. Meanwhile, small frictions line up with the portal clock. TSA pre-check downgrades to C agent for exactly 3 weeks. A 10-year subscription pings inconclusive identity, the day his status flips. A refinance drops to manual underwriting, and the banker gives him the sentence that never leaves. Your file is fine, something upstream isn't. A clearance attorney gives him the translation nobody prints. They don't have to prove you lied. They have to prove you're expensive. In this economy of confidence, expense is measured in friction. That's why supportive becomes telemetry. Wellness logs engagement. Declines log as support opportunity refused. Either way, the meter moves. Across the river, the analyst lives the mirror image. She passes. Her consoles still gray out under temporary realignment. She requests the record. AUX answers for prim. Public affairs circulates a note. Avoid engagements that could be misconstrued, bundled with the behavioral support deck. Wellness scripts, manager prompts, spouse protocol language anchored to resilience. The choreography is labeled care. It functions as containment. He documents exact words, because adjectives don't hold up in front of counsel. Non-deceptive. Temporary realignment. Prim entry not generated. AUX supports continuing evaluation. He stacks them against timestamps, TSA, bank, insurer, and watches the windows line up within 48 hours every time. A pattern is the only defense the system can't price away. We're careful about scope. None of this alleges an illegal order. It shows how discretion, tied to finance and framed as wellness, can mute a lawful witness without a claim to litigate. SF312 governs classified spills. He didn't spill. Pre-publication review governs content. He hasn't published. Clearance adjudication governs trust. Trust is where language like loss of confidence lives, difficult to challenge, quick to spread. He adapts because families live on calendars, not principles. He steps sideways into a safer role, keeps the pension banner green, and sequences his life around evaluation windows. The test didn't accuse him. It measured him. And in a system where confidence is a currency, the measure is the price. The contract's teeth, financial destruction clause. Here's where policy turns into price. Our composite witness kept SF312 clean, no classified spill, no program names, no numbers. The squeeze arrives as a confidentiality refresh that looks routine until you read the addendum. You can find cousins of these terms in public PDFs. The twist is how they're stitched together. Clause 1 reframes harm as math. Liquidated damages tied to confidence degradation events. Not speech, confidence. On a slide, it's tidy. Pre-agreed amounts to avoid costly litigation. In practice, you've just assigned a dollar figure to administrative mood. If internal logs record alignment concerns, and your lender tightens a notch after a sensitive sector vigilance bulletin, the template can declare degradation without proving injury. Clause 2 weaponizes time. Retention packages grow, resilience conditions. Miss a milestone defined in-house, and a tranche evaporates. Pension plans add freeze triggers keyed to risk indicators. On paper, it's incentive alignment. On a kitchen table, it's a spreadsheet that tells you to delay a lawful process essay until the refinance clears. Clause 3 expands ownership. Lifetime IP assignment stretches to derivative insights and process optimizations originating from exposure to sensitive programs. That's not your lab notebook, that's your conclusions about workflow. Pair it with pre-publication review, and even sanitized process notes become permanently reviewable. The briefing tone is pastoral. National security requires consistent confidence. Rev C alignment is now standard. The terms have teeth. Liquidated damages dodge the need to prove harm. Confidence gives them a moving target that never says speech. And because each piece mirrors something you can find in a public contract somewhere, it scans as normal until it stacks. He declines to sign. A week later, portfolio validation pings from his lender. Employment status shows in realignment. Automated underwriting drops to manual. Manual means time. Time becomes points and fees. His corporate card calibrates, down just enough to bounce a hotel hold. None of it says retaliation. All of it lands inside the same evaluation window his portal shows. A colleague in another composite signs Rev B under protest because the kid's calendar doesn't care about principle. The spouse support line calls with careful scripts about stability. Concern turns into instruction at home. Don't rock the boat. When arguments land on a budget, clauses win. Another signer meets clawback without a courtroom. A bonus tied to confidence maintenance is rescinded after a temporary alignment note. He asks for examples. The response cites overall perception and mission communication standards. Neutral nouns, priced outcomes. He lists the house before late notices, then calls it prudence. Insurers echo the mood with verification loops. A dependent who's been covered for years needs duplicate documents. You upload, the portal resets. A pre-authorization times out, and the resubmission window overlaps your busiest week. You pay out of pocket, call it noise, and move on. The loop repeats after the next AUX tag and stops feeling random. Counsel will tell you some states frown on punitive liquidated damages. That's why the language never says punishment. It says recovery, tied to measurable confidence loss. Measure what? Internal models, external signals like heightened vigilance in sensitive sector employment, and partner alignment notices you'll never see. Courts defer to contracts and classification. You settle before a judge ever asks what confidence means. Pre-publication is the silent accomplice. You write a process-only piece, no programs, no digits, about cadence and phrasing. The portal marks it under sensitive review. 3 months later, it still is. The addendum you refuse treats that delay as degradation if you publish without approval. If you wait, the bank clock runs out. Lawful either way. Expensive either way. Microstories keep this human. A banker calls after hours. Your file is fine. Something upstream isn't. Upstream means models sync by euphemism. A benefits rep uses throughput to explain a stall. A credentialing board adds additional review, and overnight notaries suddenly become part of your job. Each event is beige. Beige stacks. He adjusts because adults with mortgages do. He freezes credit proactively. Splits savings across institutions that don't share, integrity partners. Times disclosures around closings. It blunts edges, not cadence. The AUX tag still echoes. A $14 subscription flags inconclusive identity the day his portal updates. He clears it and logs the timestamp. This isn't villainy in a monologue. It's pricing. Confidence erosion turns insistence into liability. Resilience conditions turn care into control. You stay lawful, you stay careful, and you learn the rule that governs lives with kids' calendars and variable rates. Solvency is strategy. He writes one more line because paper is the only ledger nobody can redact after the fact. I didn't break a rule. A contract turned my patience into a penalty. Then he adds dates because dates are the only receipts these clauses respect, and the only defense that holds when every phrase sounds reasonable by itself and lethal in sequence. PsyOps in plain sight, behavioral influence appendix. We're staying inside what's documentable and illustrating with a composite. The appendix doesn't show up as a classified directive. It arrives as culture with deadlines, wellness decks, manager toolkits, and insider risk slides that blend support with surveillance. The verbs do the work. COINTELPRO taught isolation, credibility erosion, and stress. Modern training rebrands them: observation, alignment, resilience. Same mechanics. Softer nouns. Step 1 is targeted isolation without accusation. Managers receive concern prompts that sound pastoral. Noticing increased focus on anomalies, encourage mission-aligned communication. In performance portals, it logs as perception guidance. Not a ding, an angle. Colleagues see a peer feedback menu that nudges praise from precision to tone awareness. Nobody writes wrong. They write recalibrate. The circle tightens while everyone smiles. Step 2 is surveillance presented as care. Wellness scripts arrive with specifics, shift cadence, a clinic visit, spouse names. Detail proves attention. It also turns home into a compliance surface. A friendly voice knows last week's late-night login. The spouse hears safety. The target hears custody. Concern becomes leverage when money is already humming in the background. Step 3 is reputational salting at low amperage. Phrases float above output. Self-aggrandizing, over-indexed on anomalies, communication standards. Ask for examples, get overall perception. Perception is gravity. Swim against it, and you look defensive. Drift and you disappear. Either way, credibility trims without a single measurable fault. The fourth move is administrative fog. Keep prim, the visible ledger, clean with wellness, training, appreciation. Route origin signals to AUX. Post-briefing stabilization, behavioral routing per guidance, preemptive financial mitigation. If oversight knocks, Prim reflects care. Cause lives where discovery is harder and appeals don't stick. Parallel action hits the perimeter. External partners, banks, insurers, benefits administrators receive partner packs with euphemisms. Heightened vigilance in sensitive sector employment, identity incongruence, throughput verification. No lists, no names, just timing and lexicon. Models tighten on the right windows. Frontline reps can't say why. Delay shows up as prudence. A clinician on contract provides cover. Decks cite evidence-based stress reduction and support pathways. The appendix folds those pathways into routing. Enroll targets in resilience channels. Log acceptance as engagement. Log decline as support opportunity refused. Either entry feeds continuing evaluation. Care becomes telemetry. Telemetry becomes leverage. Doctrine backs the choreography. Declassified manuals outline influence through authority cues, social proof, and friction. Insider risk programs teach early intervention and holistic wellness. Put them side by side and the seam disappears. Observation flags, intervention calls, wellness frames pressure as help. The machine doesn't need to diagnose. It needs to document, and to turn documentation into gates. Micro stories make the texture legible. A birthday call lands at 7:02 a.m., names the cake, and hangs up. A guard at a building you rarely visit greets you by name and asks about last weekend's park. A link labeled behavioral risk routing appears in the portal and persists an error. None of that is actionable. All of it is suggestive. You edit yourself. Then the escalation clock. After a supportive assessment, the cadence runs. Day 2 wellness call, Day 5 manager check-in, Day 10 spouse contact. The tempo is labeled stability. It functions as pressure that fills your calendar with optics while access cools. Optional resilience sessions appear. Skip one, and the portal logs opportunity declined. Attend, and it logs engagement. Time converts to telemetry either way. Language harmonizes across rooms you don't control. HR says alignment. Security says mission assurance. Legal says confidence thresholds. Public affairs says avoid engagements that could be misconstrued. Identical phrasing across unrelated desks creates the feeling of policy where only guidance exists. That repetition is the tactic. Pre-publication becomes the catch basin. You write a process-only piece, no programs, no numbers, and submit. Under sensitive review appears and stalls. The submission itself triggers the wellness cadence again. Day 2, Day 5, Day 10. The dam isn't built to decide fast. It's built to delay until you do the life math. We're explicit about what's proven. You can verify ingredients, COINTELPRO's methods, DoD/CIA influence guidance, insider risk training, corporate wellness scripts, derivative insight clauses. You can verify outcomes without touching secrets, identical phrases across portals, care calls that know too much, AUX-only explanations that never enter prim. Public contractor PDFs adopting resilience cadence and confidence preservation inside the same 60, 90-day windows. For our composite witnesses, the appendix felt like weather that followed them indoors. Coffee invites thinned. CC lines fattened. A colleague whispered, "I know," then looked away for a month. No rule broke. An outcome did. Precise people learned to speak less. Here's the consumer-grade tell. When resilience cadence, alignment, confidence thresholds, and behavioral support appear together in one quarter after a high-visibility window, you're not watching culture. You're watching choreography. Call it care if you need to. Log it as control if you want relief that lasts. Dates beat adjectives. Exact phrases beat feelings. And cadence, once you can see it, stops being mystique and starts being a schedule you can name. The redacted memo chain. We aren't looking for a smoking gun. We're looking for a spine. The reporter files requests any editor can defend. Headers only, subject lines, dates, sender domains, no bodies. What comes back hums with uniformity. 3 different offices return nearly identical phrasing around the same terms. Post-briefing stabilization, behavioral influence routing, partner model alignment. Matching commas across unrelated desks don't prove intent by themselves. They do prove choreography worth timing. Cadence is the tell. A closed-door brief appears on a committee calendar. Within days, internal subjects surface at 2 agencies and 1 prime. Stabilization, post-event hygiene. A week later, a contractor chain echoes. Route to behavioral review per guidance. Bodies are black bars. Subjects are enough to map a clock. When 3 calendars keep time together, you're watching a process that knows its steps. Metadata survives what redaction misses. Timestamps and auto tags sometimes slip. One thread carries AUX capture only. Another marks prim hygiene updated. A third references partner model alignment financial. Administrative nouns, but the order matters. AUX first, origin, prim later, optics, partner last, echo. Our composites friction log lines up inside 48 hours every time. TSA downgrade, bank manual validation, insurer verification. Different vendors, same window. A help desk reply cracks the mask by accident. A contracting analyst asks, spouse outreach, wellness or behavioral? The answer lands clean. Per. Appendix, spouse protocol logs to AUX. Prim reflects wellness touchpoint only. That sentence explains why the visible ledger looks like care, while decisions live off ledger. You can show an audit kindness. You can't FOIA a suggestion that never becomes a finding. Language migrates with uncanny speed. A week after a radar incident, a prime posts, confidence thresholds clarified. Two suppliers mirror, resilience cadence alignment, within 24 hours. The reporter diffs the PDFs. Character for character matches tell you a canonical source pushed a template, not inspired parallelism. She doesn't claim the source. She publishes the diff. Inside an agency, a calendar stub slips through with room names intact. Risk integration cell weekly, external partner liaison, financial vector sync, contracting coordination, omni. No minutes, just titles repeating across months like a metronome. Security spots, legal phrases, contracting templates. The triad's presence is a process, not a theory. Bounce backs sing the same line across buildings. Ask for polygraph policy exceptions, get, not for prim log. Capture an AUX per guidance. Months later, our engineer receives the same words after a non-deceptive exam. Different senders, identical syntax. Somewhere, there's a style guide for caution. We don't need it in hand to show its fingerprints. Public-facing crumbs brag without noticing. A contracting digest announces, Rev alignment complete, financial vector sync operational. Footnotes cite partner engagement packs and risk framework harmonization. In a separate repository, a bank posts heightened vigilance in sensitive sector employment segments the same week. No lists, no names, just synchronized euphemism that models can parse faster than courts. Micromoments put heat on paper. A lab manager forwards a resilience cadence update and asks whether peer prompts should include tone awareness. The reply: use approved language, avoid examples. Approved language without examples salts perception and denies appeals. Next quarter, over-indexed on anomalies appears in 2 performance portals in different cities. We get transcribed locations, not screenshots. The phrase lands in the same slot. A redaction miss reveals a file name in a tooltip, behavioral_influence_outing_fc_final.pptx. Another thread references external partner liaison, financial vector sync, deck_v5. Titles confirm structure, even with bodies gone. Behavior gets a deck. Finance gets a deck. Contracting weaves them into terms. Ethics inquiries route into the same fog. AUX supports continuing evaluation. Policy names are internal and not responsive. Perfect grammar, no handles to pull. The visible memos talk wellness, modernization, support. The hidden trail, subjects, stubs, footers, shows the sequence that makes lives smaller without a single accusation. The reporter lays artifacts on a table anyone can audit. Header sets with matching phrasing, calendar stubs with recurring triads, public PDF diffs across vendors, a contracting digest aligned to a bank bulletin, the 2 file titles that escaped a pixel-wide black box. She doesn't say shut them up exists as a directive. She says move them quietly exists as a cadence you can verify in public crumbs. Our composite doesn't need persuasion. He's been living the timestamps. Watching vocabulary replicate across institutions gives him the only relief this system can't price away: confidence in his sequence. He underlines a header. Ensure AUX capture obscures origin signal. Prim reflects downstream hygiene. And replaces theories with the sentence that threads every beige event together. Same words, same windows, same outcomes. We keep the line bright. These are administrative artifacts and public diffs, not leaked bodies. But when denials match down to commas, when stubs repeat the same triad, when vendor PDFs change identical terms inside the same 90-day windows, and when banks publish mirrored euphemisms within a week, cadence becomes evidence. Not of what the phenomenon is, of how the meter moves around it. The meeting that wrote the rules. Framing note. Based on the outputs visible in public artifacts and uniform language across institutions, the following depicts how such coordination could plausibly function. It's a constructed composite of roles, agendas, and mechanisms, not a claim that we witnessed this specific meeting. It wasn't a secret summit. It was an off-site booked under a harmless umbrella: risk modernization, procurement excellence, partner assurance, at a business hotel near an airport where patterned carpet and bottomless urns make everything feel routine. Not a SCIF, a symposium with parallel breakouts. On the public calendar, cyber hygiene workshops. In the actual room, security chiefs, contracting officers from major primes, in-house counsel, a financial integrity partner, and 2 vendors who sell behavioral analytics by the seat. We don't claim attendance. We anchor what follows to titles, agendas, and collateral that surfaced as administrative residue, attachment names that outlived redaction, training outlines that migrated, public digests that bragged without realizing what they were admitting. The agenda moved like a build, not a brainstorm. They opened with definitions because verbs are the hinges. Confidence wasn't mood. It was a metric, an access gate, a human resources flag, a vendor obligation. Surveillance became observation. Pressure became resilience. A government lawyer warned that punitive language invites discovery. Contracting offered the euphemism that later colonized portals: ambient containment. Palatable to auditors, precise in effect. Architecture came next. A standing triad would own the flow. Security to spot anomalies, legal to phrase triggers into defensible terms, contracting to template actions. Prim would hold downstream hygiene, wellness, training, alignment. AUX would hold origin signals to reduce discovery risk, behavioral routing, sensitive assessments, preemptive financial mitigation. A slide drew arrows from AUX to banks and insurers labeled external partners. The finance liaison explained velocity. MOUs are slow, phrase alignment moves models in days. They treated the behavioral influence appendix like a product. Manager prompts seeded with credibility-lowering phrases. Wellness scripts with deadlines and spouse protocol language wrapped in citations to support pathways. Acceptance would log as engagement. Refusal would log as support opportunity declined. Either entry would feed continuing evaluation. The verbs smiled. The outcomes escalated within 48 hours. Polygraph capture got a policy shim. Not for prim log. Capture in AUX per guidance. No formal results unless exculpatory and strategically useful. Passing would not restore trust. It would map reactions, persistence, tone, insistence under pressure. Declining would route as resistance. The measurement, not the truth claim, would drive access decisions. Then came teeth. Legal walked liquidated damages and clawbacks around the room. A retired judge flagged jurisdictions hostile to punitive forfeitures linked to speech. Counsel's fix became the sentence that later appeared in contractor PDFs. Don't price speech, price confidence. Anchor to lifetime duties under SF 312. Extend review to derivative insights, and tie recoveries to measurable confidence degradation. Accounting, not punishment. Adoption had a cadence. 90 days post, high visibility briefings to push revisions through Tier 1 primes and select labs. Partner engagement packs for banks, insurers, and benefits administrators. No lists, no names, just synchronized euphemism. Heightened vigilance in sensitive sector employment. Identity incongruence, throughput verification. Models would tighten without a memo anyone could subpoena. A contracting trainer demoed how to socialize the appendix through guidance analogs and risk frameworks, never program names. Job slots inside contracting would add confidence preservation. Supplier handbooks would move the appendix from add-on to baseline. Onboarding would carry resilience cadence by default. If challenged, Prim would show care. AUX would remain the engine room. They rehearsed reputational hygiene. Approved language without examples. Tone awareness over precision. Over-indexed on anomalies as a floating tag. The goal wasn't a paper trail of accusations. It was a fog of perception that reduced credibility without handing anyone a clean appeal. A compliance lead pitched the external sync, quarterly integrity calls with financial partners. Share timing and lexicon, let models do the rest. Lists are radioactive, signals are not, the banker said. Segment hot for 6 months is enough to nudge rate locks, lines, and manual underwriting. Later looks prudent. Later costs money. Someone in mid-career counsel still said oath out loud. We're building a machine that looks like paperwork. The response was organizational gravity. Modernization demands consistency. Consistency demands cadence. Ethics could comfort themselves with wellness and support. The triad would carry the verbs that move lives. By the last session, the pieces clicked. Security's watch list of behaviors. Legal's dictionary of defensible phrases. Contracting's templates, derivative insights, confidence thresholds, resilience conditions, ready to cascade. Public affairs would seed avoid engagements that could be misconstrued as the external wrapper. HR would deliver scripts. Vendor portals would absorb identical clauses inside the same window. No grand directive, just defaults that compile. Within weeks, portal language began to match what the slide titles promised. Within a quarter, onboarding pages across vendors shifted appendix to baseline and added spouse protocol awareness. Within the same week, a contracting digest bragged financial vector sync operational. A bank posted heightened vigilance in sensitive sector employment segments. No lists, no signatures, just synchronization. We keep the line clear. We don't allege a nameplate program voted in that room. We track how titles, timelines, and public artifacts reveal an operating system. Define confidence as a metric, route origin to AUX, show care in prim, harmonize partners through language, and move faster than oversight can ask for policy numbers. The brilliance wasn't secrecy. It was cadence. Case study 1. The engineer who logged the impossible. He didn't chase a story. He chased a ratio. Sample 47BS isotopic profile wouldn't sit where terrestrial baseline said it should. Stable in one band, stubborn in another, with a decay curve that argued back. He did what the SOP demands. Replicate on a fresh column, blind the prep, swap instruments, recalibrate with standards, verify chain of custody twice. The noise stayed signal. Stakes were technical and personal. If the numbers were right, either upstream mislabeled provenance, his instruments lied in a way they shouldn't, or he'd brushed an origin he wasn't cleared to touch. He wrote a tight packet, methods, runs, tolerances, and requested independent mass spec time at the sister lab. No adjectives, just decimals and error bars. Then his world learned a new verb. Alignment. Instrument access paused pending portfolio realignment. The anomaly storage code hopped beyond his query permissions. A bland project far from isotopes appeared on his dashboard. Email language shifted from science to him. Post-briefing stabilization, route to behavioral review, continuing evaluation. Each phrase, individually, could pass any audit. Together, they moved the spotlight. A confidentiality refresh slid across his desk. Derivative insights subject to pre-publication review. Lifetime IP reach into process optimizations, a resilience acknowledgement. He knew SF312. This wasn't that. Versions of these updates exist in public contract PDFs. He declined and asked for a meeting. The meeting became a calendar hold. The hold became silence. Care arrived first. A wellness call landed at home with details that proved attention, shift cadence, a clinic date he hadn't shared at work, resources for families. Concern felt like custody. His spouse said what spouses say when a refinance clock runs. Maybe keep your head down. Pressure priced as prudence. He took the supportive assessment. Baselines, neutral prompts, the administrative circle. Have you discussed work outside authorized channels? Do you intend to disclose restricted information? No and no. The examiner offered the comfort line, non-deceptive on relevant questions. He expected his dashboards to light. They didn't. Security wrote, not every assessment generates a primary record. Auxiliary capture supports continuing evaluation. Prim is the ledger you can request. AUX is the lane you can't see. Passing didn't clear him. It mapped him. Micro-frictions followed a clock. TSA PreCheck flipped to see agent for exactly 3 weeks. The span his portal showed continuing evaluation. A long-held subscription pinged inconclusive identity the day his status updated. A refinance dropped from automated to manual underwriting. A banker whispered, your file is fine, something upstream isn't. Upstream is where guidance lives. He stayed lawful. Under the 2023 NDA, he filed a protected, process-only disclosure, no program names, no classified figures, about routing irregularities and expanded review. He received a receipt and nothing else. Channels protect the act. They don't restore access. Inside, praise moved from precision to tone awareness. Peer feedback menus offered concern without examples. Over-indexed on anomalies, self-aggrandizing. A manager who used to ask for plots now asked about mission communication standards. The record didn't accuse. It drifted. He hunted anchors he could hold. Internal queries returned redactions with surviving headers that still told a sequence. Post-briefing stabilization, materials portfolio, route to behavioral review per appendix, initiate preemptive financial mitigation. Each line alone was beige. Together, they were choreography. He wrote exact phrases with dates in a notebook because paper is the only ledger no one edits later. He met a reporter who understood boundaries. He brought timing, not spectra, phrases, not programs. She filed narrow public records requests for hotel invoices near an off-site, contractor revision logs that added confidence preservation within 90 days of closed-door briefings, headers only, behavioral routing, partner model alignment. Denials came back with matching paragraphs across unrelated desks. Harmonized guidance leaves harmonized refusal. Home measured impact in inches. A grocery decline at a busy register. A benefits verification loop that reset after he uploaded the right document. A birthday song at 7:02 a.m. from a block number that knew his cake. Care through glass. He called it noise out loud and wrote the timestamps in private. He adjusted. He froze credit. Split savings across institutions without shared integrity partners. Timed filings around closings. It helped at the edges, not at the center. The AUX tag still echoed. The phrase temporary adjustment supports mission assurance showed up in HR's portal. The bank sent manual validation required. The insurer wanted verification resubmission. Beige logged. The sister lab finally echoed his numbers within tight error. Their note was flat, confirmation without flourish. He carried it like a 4-pound receipt and said only it repeated. His manager didn't argue the data. He asked whether the addendum was signed. The answer mattered more than the plot. Across the river, an analyst he'd never met passed her exam and still watched consoles go gray under temporary realignment. Different desk, same cadence. She wrote one sentence on a receipt. I passed, and the pass mapped me, and folded it into a coat pocket like a token against gaslight. He took a lateral to a harmless project and checked the pension line like a pulse. No Rev C signature. No triumph. He labeled a folder friction and kept writing what the system can erase. Exact words, exact dates, the way clocks rhyme across buildings when people touch an inconvenient pattern. He didn't leak. He logged. Because in a regime that prices insistence, memory is the only instrument that doesn't require permission to run, and pattern is the only proof that survives a smile. Case study 2. The analyst who passed, then disappeared. She built her reputation on restraint, signals, telemetry, pattern of life overlays, the kind of craft that rewards short sentences and punishes adjectives. After an airborne anomaly cluster lit 2 radar nets, she caught identical jitter artifacts in returns that shouldn't share an air mass. She logged it clean, time, beam geometry, error bars, route through the channel. That's the job. Stakes were supposed to be simple. Pass hygiene, keep clearance, stay on the live floor. Her supervisor framed the assessment as supportive, voluntary, confidence, standard. She'd watched what happened to people who declined. She didn't decline. The exam ran like a metronome. Baselines to set rhythm. Neutral prompts to park the needle. Then the administrative circle. Have you discussed work outside authorized channels? Do you intend to disclose restricted information? No and no. The examiner closed the folder with the sentence professionals carry like armor. Non-deceptive on all relevant questions. She expected her dashboards back. Instead, her inbox hummed the phrase she'd later see in other buildings. Temporary realignment supports mission assurance. Tickets vanished. Live feeds returned as training modules she'd already completed. She asked for the formal result to anchor an appeal. Security replied with the line that turns doors into walls. Prim entry not generated. Auxiliary capture supports continuing evaluation. Care arrived on schedule. 48 hours later, a wellness call used accurate specifics, shift cadence, a recent clinic visit, her spouse's first name. Care that proves attention feels like custody. At home, concern hardened into advice. Maybe hold the draft, maybe skip the coffee. Calendars enforce policy without saying policy. Inside, language shifted under her feet. Peer feedback introduced phrases that never touched her output. Tone awareness, over-indexed on anomalies, communication standards. Ask for examples, get overall perception. Perception is gravity. Swim against it, and you look defensive. Drift and you disappear. She did what professionals do when the floor tilts. She wrote a calm restoration memo, quoted the examiner verbatim, and requested the prim record. The reply repeated the script. AUX supports continuing evaluation. AUX is where recommendations live. Appeals don't. The perimeter echoed the tempo. A 10-year subscription tripped a fraud ping the day her portal updated. She cleared it and watched her issuer recalibrate a limit, just enough to bounce a hotel hold on a trip she no longer had. Clearance to take. TSA pre-check dropped to see agent for precisely 3 weeks, matching her evaluation window. None of it admitted cause. All of it matched timing. She filed a protected disclosure under the 2023 NDA channel. Process irregularities. AUX-only capture, retroactive pre-publication flags on drafts that never needed them. The receipt arrived. So did a reminder about lifetime obligations and a link to pre-publication review. Channels protect the act. They don't reopen a console. Public Affairs circulated a note. Avoid engagements that could be misconstrued. Attached was the behavioral support deck. Wellness scripts, manager prompts, spouse protocol language, wrapped in citations to resilience. A counselor's memo praised her professionalism and suggested alignment with mission communication standards. She copied the exact line into a paper notebook with the date. Pre-publication became the dam. She submitted a process-only piece, no programs, no numbers, about telemetry hygiene and cadence. Under sensitive review appeared and never moved. The submission itself triggered the same wellness cadence she'd just lived. Day 2 call, Day 5 check-in, Day 10 spouse outreach. The choreography was labeled care. It functioned like containment. Micro moments told the temperature better than banners. A colleague waved from a distance and let a joke die when someone walked in. Lunch invites thinned. CC lines fattened around threads she used to lead. A junior slid a coffee to her desk and whispered, "I know," then avoided her eyes for a month. Not malice. Calibration. She tried to stabilize the part she could reach, her timeline. She asked for a developmental rotation before someone could gift it. The title stayed level, the floor changed. She checked the pension line like a pulse and kept a folded receipt in her coat pocket with the sentence she wrote the night the feeds didn't come back. I passed, and the pass mapped me. Money learned the same words her portal did. A banker said, "Your file is fine, something upstream isn't." An insurer paused a routine claim into throughput. A credentialing board added additional review and forced overnight notarizations. She hit every deadline and paid in time. She documented exact phrases, because adjectives don't hold in front of counsel. Temporary realignment supports mission assurance. Prim entry not generated. AUX supports continuing evaluation. Heightened vigilance in sensitive sector employment. She stacked them against timestamps, TSA downgrade, issuer recalibration, insurer loop, and watched the 48-hour windows rhyme. Across the river, the engineer's notebook carried the same vocabulary. Different desk, same cadence. She took that as the only relief this system can't price away, confidence in sequence. Her last walk past the room where the anomaly cluster lived felt louder than it looked. Heads down, screens humming. No one looked up. At home, she opened the portal and watched under sensitive review sit like a stone. She closed the laptop and said the quiet sentence out loud. It's not about truth. It's about cost. She didn't resign. She recalibrated. She kept doing careful work in a harmless lane and stopped insisting. Her notes stayed neat, her clock stayed tight, and her voice learned the market's lesson. In a field that prices confidence, persistence is expensive, and the only receipt that endures is the pattern you can prove without a headline. The legal architecture, how lawful becomes lethal. From the building's perspective, none of this is a scandal. It's plumbing. Start with SF312, the Classified Information Non-Disclosure Agreement, most cleared personnel sign. It binds you to a lifetime duty not to disclose classified information, with real criminal penalties for willful spill. Our composites honored it. The pressure lives beside it, not inside it. Clearances aren't rights, they're eligibility decisions rooted in trust. Adjudicators apply the whole person concept across 13 factors: foreign influence, financial responsibility, personal conduct, phrases that sound clinical and translate to discretion with a badge. Evidence can be classified. Your counsel may never see the file. Formal findings are rare. Recommendations move faster. In that gap, language carries power. Loss of confidence isn't an accusation. It's a gate closing without a gavel. Temporary realignment isn't punishment, it's access dissolving under colorless policy. SCIF rules narrow your exit lanes. Anything born in the vault belongs to the vault until reviewers say otherwise. Pre-publication review started as a memoir filter. Over time it swallowed more: emails, appendices, process notes. Pair it with corporate derivative insights, clauses, and even sanitized conclusions about workflow can require approval. Under sensitive review becomes a timer, not a deliberation. The delay itself is leverage. Private law reinforces public law. Corporate NDAs and trade secret provisions protect proprietary information. Defense contractors fuse those to classification, so courts defer to contracts while agencies defer to secrecy. Liquidated damages look tidy, pre-agreed amounts to avoid proving harm. Rebrand speech-adjacent behavior as confidence degradation, and you've priced insistence without saying speech. Add retention, resilience conditions, and pension freeze triggers keyed to risk indicators. Suddenly, timing your words becomes a financial plan. Polygraphs sit in their own cul-de-sac. Courts largely mistrust them. Inside access systems, they inform trust. Voluntary on paper, mandatory in temperature. The crucial detail is record routing. If captures enter AUX, not prim, you lose an appealable artifact. Non-deceptive on relevant questions never appears as a shield. Supports continuing evaluation, appears as a fog. Passing maps your insistence curve. Refusing maps your resistance. Either path fuels the same meter. Whistleblower protections help with aim, not aftermath. The 2023 NDA carved lawful channels for UAP-related disclosures to inspectors general and Congress, and carved exceptions to NDAs for reporting through those routes. That shields the act from formal retaliation. It doesn't command restoration of access, force pre-publication timelines, unwind auxiliary captures, or stop a bank from tightening after a sensitive sector vigilance bulletin. You can be legally right and practically sidelined. If you try to litigate, two doors close early. The state secrets privilege ends cases before discovery if adjudicating would risk classified exposure. Trade secret doctrine fills the rest. If counsel can't say classified, they can say proprietary and persuade a judge to preserve competitive position. You face an agency's silence and a corporation's logo. Meanwhile, pre-publication can hold a process essay on the theory that overall subject matter overlaps sensitive domains. That phrase does most of the work while saying almost nothing. Jurisdictions vary on punitive liquidated damages. The workaround is framing. Recovery tied to measurable confidence loss reads like accounting, not punishment. What counts as measurable? Internal risk models, partner lexicon like heightened vigilance and sensitive sector employment, and alignment notes you'll never see. Even if a clause might fail years later, the interim pressure succeeds. Manual underwriting, paused claims, verification loops. You lose by attrition, not by verdict. Tie these parts and the machine appears. SF312 guards secrets. Clearance adjudication manages risk. SCIF rules and pre-publication control spill. NDAs and trade secrets extend custody. Polygraphs inform trust without producing due process anchors. Whistleblower channels protect the act, not the calendars. State secrets prevents daylight. Finance enforces tempo. None of these alone is abuse. In sequence, they convert discretion into outcome. Facts become factors. Factors become recommendations. Recommendations become lives that speak less. That's why vocabulary is payload. Observation instead of surveillance. Resilience instead of pressure. Mission assurance instead of penalty. Confidence thresholds instead of speech policing. Each term passes an audit. Together, they steer a person. The visible record, PRIM, shows care, wellness notes, training completions, alignment feedback. The engine room, AUX, holds origin signals, post-briefing stabilization, behavioral routing per guidance, preemptive financial mitigation. If oversight knocks, the file reads humane. The cause never wears a name tag. We keep our claims inside verifiable fences. You can read SF312. You can read the adjudicative guidelines that define the whole person concept. You can read public contractor updates where derivative insights, confidence preservation, resilience cadence, and spouse protocol awareness appear inside the same 60, 90-day windows after visible briefings. You can't FOIA AUX. That's the design. Guidance moves faster than policy precisely because policy can be asked for. A clearance attorney gave us the sentence that explains the architecture better than 100 slides. They don't have to prove you're wrong. They have to prove you're expensive. Expense is measured in friction, lost time, delayed money, softened credibility, and friction becomes policy when it repeats on schedule. In that world, lawful becomes lethal through cadence. Delay is currency. Guidance is courier. Care is camouflage. The one piece they couldn't bury. Framing note. What follows is a plausible scenario constructed from recurring patterns and public residues. It illustrates how such a discovery might look in practice. It is not a claim of an actual, specific artifact we obtained. It slipped because someone missed a corner. He was reviewing redacted PDFs, headers only, when a thumbnail preview flashed the wrong file name for a chain of custody addendum tied to his materials queue. He clicked before the recall flag landed. The body was black bars. The margins weren't. A tiny note survived the mask. Route via behavioral influence, AUX before replication. Chain of custody is sacred. Who touched what, when, and where it goes next. If behavioral routing sits in that trail, the mechanism isn't downstream triage. It's embedded at the evidence table. He froze, then checked the auto-generated footer that redaction missed. Template author was a contracting workspace, not the lab. Procurement owned the form that told science where to breathe. He traced timestamps against his notebook. His handoff logged at 9:14. The addendum line stamped 9:22, the same minute his inbox received post-briefing stabilization. Below the margin note a second line peeked through. AUX capture prior to external verification. That inversion mattered. Before replication routing. Guidance first, science later. He didn't print. He copied the wording longhand, closed the file, and watched the recall slip arrive too late. Then he called the analyst on the quiet line and read her the exact phrase. She went silent, then sent a fragment from her cache, a lab header referencing a restricted project code with a mirror note. Track AUX only, prim to reflect hygiene. 2 buildings. Same lexicon. Impact landed immediately. If chain of custody forms carry AUX flags, external vendors can be timed without names, mass spec slots rebalanced, confirmations whispered, windows tightened. The sample stops being only material. It becomes a case. He checked file properties again. The username fragment on the template matched a contracting liaison tag he'd seen on public revision logs that introduced confidence preservation weeks after a closed-door briefing. The same hand threaded routes and rollouts. He took the handwritten note to ethics and asked a narrow question. Where does AUX prior to verification get authority? Ethics thanked him, then routed to the risk triad. The reply arrived in perfect grammar. Chain of custody language is standardized and does not reflect adjudication. Standardized means replicated. Replicated means deliberate. He logged the sentence with the time and left before he said more. The perimeter echoed on cue. A $14 subscription flagged, inconclusive identity. The day his portal status ticked. TSA pre-check flipped to see agent for the exact length of his evaluation window. Different desks. 1 clock. He drew arrows on a legal pad. Report stabilization email, chain note, AUX flag, spouse script bank friction. It looked like overkill until he circled the smallest phrase. AUX before replication. The reporter pinned his transcription to her corkboard beside public diffs where contractors added resilience cadence and confidence thresholds inside the same 90-day windows. No body text, just residues, file names that escaped, headers that matched, footers that forgot to lie. Enough to show the route without claiming a room. He called the analyst back. It's not hovering above the science, he said. It's in the evidence paperwork. She exhaled. Then procurement isn't a passenger. It's the driver. He tapped the username fragment in his notes, contracting liaison, and wrote the only sentence that made the page feel steady. If AUX rides chain of custody, the choreography starts at the table where facts are born. The architects, contract officers and compliance cells, follow the username in that chain of custody residue, and the trail leaves science. It walks into contracting, where verbs get templated and live longer than people. Not buyers and shipping clerks, the drafters. Titles read harmless, contract officer, enterprise compliance, vendor risk lead. Calendars don't. They carry recurring blocks labeled liaison sync, rev alignment cadence, partner model harmonization. The same triad shows up every week. Security flags the behaviors, legal phrases them into defensible terms. Contracting converts them into defaults other desks can't easily refuse. Their leverage isn't a threat, it's a template. One sentence in boilerplate becomes a requirement, then a condition, then a life. After off-site season, revisions don't trickle. They cascade, 3 primes in a week, 2 more inside a month, with character-for-character matches that tell you a canonical file moved through shared hands. Public revision logs timestamp the drumbeat. Derivative insights appears in the spring. Confidence thresholds and resilience cadence appear 90 days after hearings. Spouse protocol awareness migrates from appendix to baseline by fall. That's not culture. That's deployment. We compared public PDFs where we could. Hashes matched. The residue points to a central authoring tree feeding multiple logos with the same phrases, spacing, even hyphen choices. We don't need the repository to see the residue. The same liaison tag that hid in the chain of custody footer appears in document properties on supplier FAQs that first introduced confidence preservation. The hand that touched evidence paperwork also touched contract language. That's a pipeline, not a coincidence. A former compliance manager, worn down, gave the texture without burning herself. "We were told to harmonize resilience," she said over coffee. "In practice, we price communication." I wrote a line that turned no comment into a trigger for financial review. It looked clever on a slide. Then a man sold his house. She wrote "ethical mismatch" on her exit form and left the templates behind. Templates don't resign. Org charts hide the engine in plain sight. Enterprise risk sits over security, legal, and compliance. Contract management threads between them, stitching clauses that outlive controversy. That's where derivative insight widened pre-publication to process talk. That's where expedited verification became a euphemism for call your bank before we do. Banks don't need dossiers. They need the phrase heightened vigilance in sensitive sector employment delivered on a quarterly integrity sync. Models tighten without anyone writing your name. A monthly digest from one contracting group bragged, "Rev alignment complete across Tier 1 suppliers. Phase 2 spouse protocol awareness initiated." The same week, 3 spouses in 3 cities reported near-identical support calls. A trainer's deck for new officers spelled the camouflage in bullet points. Use guidance analogs, avoid policy references, cite risk frameworks, not program names. Teach a language that passes audits while moving people. There's a slide for partner engagement most viewers could find if they knew where to look. Brief banks and insurers using public risk frameworks, align lexicon. Facilitate independent model calibration. Translation. Share timing in words, not lists. Get the effect of a directive with 0 paperwork to subpoena. One banker summarized the method in a sentence that belongs on a wall. Lists are radioactive, signals are not. Microstories leak from edges. A junior analyst in contracts DM'd a mentor. "Feels like we're marketing to ourselves." The reply came back like a koan. "We keep the mission safe by keeping people in lanes." The junior left before his first promotion. The lanes remained. Impact radiates in metrics that are boring until they rhyme. Exit interviews spike at labs inside 90 days of rev adoption. Pre-publication queues for process pieces triple. A CFO stands on a slide and claims 60% reduction in reputational incidents without litigation. The footnote is the confession, alignment complete, financial vector sync operational. We showed that line to a procurement friend. She said, "It means friction shows up where it needs to, and nobody has to call it friction." Meanwhile, the triad matures into a drumbeat. Case review, financial sync, spouse outcomes appears on agendas as routine business. AUX becomes the default lane for origin signals that might attract discovery later. Prim gets padded with hygiene, wellness notes, training completions, appreciative feedback. So if anyone asks, the file looks like care. That's not sloppiness. That's design. Ethics offices route concerns neatly back to the triad with thank you notes about mission assurance. The phrase repeats like a stamp. Every time it lands, another door closes without anyone raising their voice. Here's the piece that matters for viewers trying to separate rumor from structure. Security can only move as fast as legal can phrase, and legal can only phrase what contracting can template. Once a template carries confidence preservation, derivative insights, resilience cadence, and partner model alignment, HR, banks, and insurers behave like policy exists even if everyone swears it's just guidance. Copy, paste, cascade, that's the architecture. The architects are in conference rooms with patterned carpet, not in shadows, and they're very good at writing defaults that compile across institutions before anyone has time to vote on what they mean. Psychological warfare tactics, step by step. We're sticking to what's teachable, verifiable, and lived, declassified influence doctrine, modern insider risk slides, and the repeating lexicon you've already heard in this story. The tactics don't shout, they rhythm. Step 1, credential erosion. Your record shifts from excellent to strong. A recurring invite stops auto-adding your name. A door that always recognized your badge pauses half a beat. Managers pivot praise from precision to tone awareness. No one alleges error. Adjectives move. You start measuring yourself against a smaller room. Step 2, time theft. Optional resilience sessions appear on your calendar. Optional means presumed. Skip 1, and the portal logs resilience opportunity declined. Attend and it logs engagement. Add a supportive check-in, a quick compliance touchpoint, and a manager debrief. Hours evaporate into care. Real work becomes what you do after discussing your work. Step 3, sleep sanding. A fraud ping at 6 a.m., a quick check at 10 p.m., a training reminder at 5:59 with no action required. You mute one channel, another lights. It's grit in the gears, not harassment. After 2 weeks, you're a fraction duller in every room that counts, and fatigue reads like attitude in portals that harvest tone. Step 4, concerned colleague scripts. People you trust arrive with soft prompts. You seem preoccupied. Anything we can do? Say yes, and they log stress indicators. Say no, and they log support opportunity refused. Either entry feeds continuing evaluation. Care becomes telemetry. Telemetry becomes leverage. Step 5, perimeter softening. A family call from a resources for high-stress roles, line lands with accurate specifics, shift cadence, a clinic appointment, your spouse's name. It's presented as support. It plays as custody. At home, concern turns into guidance. Pause the draft, skip the coffee, wait for the refinance. Calendars do what policies can't write. Step 6, narrative salting. Peer portals seed floating phrases that hover above output. Self-aggrandizing, over-indexed on anomalies, communication standards. Ask for examples, get overall perception. Perception is a current. Push and you look defensive. Drift and you disappear. Credibility trims without a measurable fault. Step 7, visibility toggles. A link labeled behavioral risk routing appears and persists an error. A lobby guard at a building you rarely use greets you by name and mentions last weekend's park. An email quotes a line from a meeting no one recorded. Nothing actionable. Everything suggestive. You pre-edit your sentences. Step 8, administrative fog. Prim, the visible ledger, fills with hygiene, wellness notes, training completions, appreciative feedback. AUX holds origin signals, post-briefing stabilization, behavioral routing per guidance, preemptive financial mitigation. If oversight knocks, the file shows care. The decisions that matter live where discovery is slower and appeals don't stick. Step 9, financial echo. Partners get alignment packs. No lists, just euphemisms. Heightened vigilance in sensitive sector employment, identity incongruence, throughput verification. Models tighten in the right windows. Frontline reps can't say why. You meet manual underwriting, a rate lock slip, a temporary limit calibration. Delay turns into a bill. Step 10, social vacuum. Coffee invites thin. CC lines thicken. A colleague drops a joke when someone else walks in. It isn't cruelty. It's calibration in a room where proximity spends reputation. You become safe to praise in past tense and risky to stand next to now. The cadence follows windows, not whims. After a protected disclosure, closed-door brief, or pre-publication submission, a clock starts. Within 48 hours, wellness touchpoint. Within a week, manager concern prompt. Within one cycle, spouse outreach. In parallel, vendors update terms, confidence thresholds, resilience cadence, and banks circulate sensitive sector vigilance. The sequence repeats because it's designed to. Doctrine underwrites the moves. Declassified guides teach social proof, authority cues, and friction. Insider risk programs rebrand them as observation, alignment, and holistic wellness. Put the slides side by side, and the scene disappears. The system doesn't need to prove you wrong. It needs to make persistence expensive. Polygraphs play gate, not gavel. Voluntary on paper, mandatory in temperature. Off-ledger capture means no clean pass/fail banner, only supports continuing evaluation. Passing maps insistence. Refusing maps resistance. Either input feeds the same meter that drives step 1 through 10. Pre-publication is the dam that looks like a filter. You submit a process-only piece, no programs, no numbers. Under sensitive review, appears and stays. The submission itself triggers the wellness cadence again. The dam isn't meant to decide fast. It's meant to hold until you do life math and choose delay. Microstories keep you honest. A birthday call knows the cake. A benefits portal resets after you upload exactly what it asked for. TSA flips to C agent for the length of your evaluation window. A banker says the line that translates everything. Your file is fine. Something upstream isn't. Upstream is where guidance lives. Here's the consumer-grade checklist you can run in real time. Adjectives move, hours disappear, sleep sands, concern scripts, perimeter softens, perception salts, visibility toggles, fog thickens, money echoes, the room gets quiet. When 4 or more land within a quarter after a high visibility window, and the phrases match across desks, you're not in culture. You're in choreography. What breaks the spell isn't outrage. It's receipts. Right exact words. Temporary realignment supports mission assurance. Prim entry not generated. AUX supports continuing evaluation. Heightened vigilance in sensitive sector employment. Timestamp the frictions that echo those phrases within 48 hours. Compare across 2 other people in 2 other cities. If the clocks rhyme, you've named the rhythm. Once the rhythm is visible, it stops feeling like weather and starts reading like policy that forgot to put its name on the door. The money web, banks, benefits, and back channels. While the appendix worked the room, money moved like weather. Not refusals, frictions. Banks don't need orders. They need a phrase from a trusted liaison. Heightened vigilance in sensitive sector employment, and models tighten on schedule. It often starts with a flag you never see. A suspicious activity report trips on identity incongruence or pattern deviation. Dollar amounts are trivial, consequences aren't. A refinance drops from automated to manual underwriting. Manual means time. Time is points and fees. A rate lock inches toward expiry while an underwriter says, your file is fine. Something upstream isn't. Credit learns the same lexicon. A card issuer calibrates, a limit the day your portal flips to continuing evaluation. It's just enough to bounce a hotel hold you didn't need anymore because access grayed out. You call it a glitch out loud and write the timestamp in private. Insurers echo through verification loops. A dependent who's been covered for years suddenly needs duplicate documents. You upload, the portal resets. A routine specialist pre-authorization times out, and the resubmission window overlaps your busiest week. No denial, just later, twice. Later costs co-pays, late fees, and reputation when a clinic staffer says the quiet thing. We're still waiting on upstream. Back channels make it fast. Compliance teams at primes host integrity syncs with a bank, an insurer, and a bureau liaison. No MOUs, just timing and euphemism. Segment hot for 6 months, identity incongruence, throughput verification. Signals, not lists. A model trims risk without anyone writing your name. Our composite watched the cascade keep a clock. Underwriting paused with manual validation within 48 hours of an AUX note. TSA pre-check toggled to see agent for exactly the span listed as continuing evaluation. A $14 subscription flagged inconclusive identity the day his status updated. Different vendors, one window. A banker friend explained the method in the one line that matters. Lists are radioactive, signals are not. If a trusted partner calls and says segment hot, you tighten exposure, rate locks, lines, pre-approvals into come back later. Later reads prudent. Later bills you. Vendors are coached to help. Partner packs tell suppliers, we appreciate proactive outreach to your financial compliance teams when resilience flags arise. Proactive means call your bank before we do. The next quarter, employees in different cities reported identical manual validations, landing the same week their managers seeded alignment in portals. Geography didn't matter. Cadence did. Microstories keep it human. A propulsion specialist kept quiet, signed a clause, and still watched his home equity line stall on renewal after standard identity verification. 20 years with the same bank. An underwriter called after hours and said, your file is fine. Something upstream isn't. Upstream means guidance the rep can't see and can't admit. Benefits mirror the mood. A disability claim moves to throughput while the insurer works diligently. It pays eventually, after the late fee and the credit ding. A credentialing board adds additional review, and turns notarizations into a scavenger hunt. You meet the deadline by inches, spend 2 vacation days on paperwork, and learn why friction beats verdicts. Families feel it as narrative, not policy. A spouse gets a support call that knows the clinic date, then watches a grocery decline, then hears you say manual underwriting again. Concern becomes advice. Keep your head down, not with the refi clock running. Concern is leverage when money is a metronome. Law doesn't bite here. Discrimination statutes protect classes, not risk segments. As long as nobody writes UAP witness, and they won't, you're a customer in a sensitive sector during a heightened vigilance window. Courts can't enjoin a model's mood. The timeline correlates with public calendars. After closed-door briefings, primes revise confidence terms. Onboarding pages adopt resilience cadence. Banks circulate sensitive sector vigilance. Insurers tweak identity weights. None of it says UFO. All of it lands on people who just filed protected disclosures or sat for voluntary exams. People adapt because solvency is strategy. The engineer froze credit proactively, split savings across institutions without shared integrity partners, and timed filings around closings. It blunted the edges, not the clock. The AUX Echo still found a $14 subscription and a TSA line. He built a folder called Friction. Screenshots with timestamps, bank pauses, insurer loops, TSA downgrades, license clarifications. Each tile beige and apologetic. Together, a mosaic of synchronized caution. Across the river, the Analyst logged the same echoes. Fraud ping, issuer recalibration, throughput, see agent, each inside the same 3-week window. She paired them with exact phrases. Temporary realignment supports mission assurance. Prim entry not generated. AUX supports continuing evaluation. Words match clocks. Here's the leverage viewers can use without touching secrets. Capture euphemisms exactly. Heightened vigilance in sensitive sector employment. Manual validation. Throughput verification. Write the date, the actor, and the phrasing. When 3 people in 3 cities see the same words inside the same window, cadence becomes evidence of how the meter moves, not what the phenomenon is. Because money doesn't argue. It arrives on time. And in this system, timing is the tell. The attempted exposure, reporter, FOIA, and a vanishing source. Framing note. This section demonstrates how a cautious reporter and source could reconstruct a pattern using only public, defensible artifacts and headers. It's an illustrative pathway, not a claim about a specific case file in our possession. He wasn't chasing headlines. He wanted a receipt. He met a reporter who leads with limits. No SCIF material, no staff calendars, headers only. He laid out fragments that don't burn anyone. A misaddressed off-site invite, uniform denial paragraphs, public contract diffs where confidence preservation arrived inside the same 90-day windows. She nodded and sharpened the blade. Her FOIAs moved like scalpels. Hotel invoices and room schedules for the airport week. Headers only, subject, date, routing, containing behavioral influence routing. Contract revision logs that added resilience cadence within 90 days of publicized briefings. Calendaring stubs with room names and attendees trimmed. Administrative artifacts any editor can defend. The first wave came back as fog. Acknowledgements, delays, and the identical paragraph from 3 offices. We can neither confirm nor deny the existence of records responsive to your request. Same commas. Same cadence. She appealed on scope. Headers are administrative, bodies are content. The chorus returned unchanged. When refusals harmonize, there's a style guide somewhere. So she moved sideways. The hotel's public logs showed a thermostat ticket for a ballroom at the right hour. The clerk remembered whiteboards and unlabeled lanyards. Not proof, texture. She logged it and kept to artifacts. A contracting office slipped a revision index with 1 line unredacted at the bottom. Behavioral influence, appendix adoption. No body, just the spine. She pinned it to her corkboard and narrowed again. A follow-up request keyed to that office, that date, that phrase. Response, under review due to sensitivities. Translation, yes later. Meanwhile, she collected receipts no one could memory hole. Vendor PDF diffs adding confidence thresholds. Supplier FAQs adopting resilience cadence. Job postings inside contracting that suddenly required confidence preservation as a skill. The source slowed. Messages stretched, then stopped. 2 words arrived, family first. She didn't chase. She called a procurement contact who wouldn't go on record. We were told to align resilience, he said. We aligned banks. Authority? Guidance. Guidance doesn't sign. Her devices started to sing. A border search flagged screen pulled her into secondary at the airport. A week later, unusual sign-in from privileged network. She rotated passwords and went back to headers. The work stayed boring on purpose. She drafted a cautious line built for readers who want receipts. Within 90 days of closed-door UAP briefings, multiple contractors added confidence preservation language to confidentiality terms. Anyone can diff that. Then she wrote the second sentence that patterned carpet rooms fear more than leaks. You don't need secrets to show the system. You need a ledger. Reconstructing the contract, ABC, framing note. The ABC reconstruction below is a plausible methodology built from public diffs, cached pages, and routine logs. It outlines how someone could trace contract evolution without accessing restricted material. She pinned one clean residue to the corkboard, behavioral influence, appendix adoption, and worked backward like a coder tracing a bug through commits. Contracts evolve the way software does. If there's an appendix, there were earlier versions that made it possible. You don't need bodies of documents to see them. You need the artifacts nobody thinks to scrub. File names and tooltips, public change logs, cached onboarding pages, supplier FAQs that shift tone inside the same 90-day windows. Rev A showed first in the blandest place, routine confidentiality updates fused to the SF312 spine. The headline terms were familiar: protect classified, no unauthorized retention, lifetime duty. The fork-hid in one clause that sounds academic until it lands on your calendar. Pre-publication obligations extend to derivative insights. That phrase widens the fence. It doesn't name programs or numbers. It treats your conclusions about process as reviewable content. The timing lined up with a quiet season, months before high-visibility hearings. Vendors posted, "We've updated our terms," banners no one reads. The base moved without heat. Rev B arrived after the briefings that juiced committee calendars and set our header map ticking. The tone stayed pastoral: assurance, alignment, resilience. The architecture changed. Liquidated damages appeared alongside confidence preservation and degradation events. Not punishment for speech, never that, but recovery tied to measurable confidence loss. Retention added resilience conditions. Pensions learned freeze triggers keyed to confidence indicators. Public PDFs showed the verbs entering across multiple logos within 60 to 90 days of the same windows. On the ground, the life side echoed. Fewer revocations, more manual underwriting, more calibration on cards, more people selling early and calling it prudence. We turned insistence into accounting. A council FAQ that migrated between suppliers gave away the legal theory. Don't define the act, price the outcome. Frame value recovery, not penalty. Tie it to confidence as a business metric. Courts like arithmetic more than motive. She underlined the word that sits under every euphemism: camouflage. Rev C was the leap from ledger to people, the appendix that made the cadence visible. We didn't have bodies. We had titles and timing that matched lived experience. C grafted a behavioral influence appendix onto the trunk and moved spouse protocol awareness from a footnote to a baseline onboarding item. Manager prompts seeded phrases like tone awareness and over-indexed on anomalies. Wellness scripts picked up deadlines. Routing rules got a shim. Not for prim log, capture an AUX per guidance. Acceptance logged as engagement. Refusal logged as support opportunity declined. Either entry fed continuing evaluation. And buried in change logs across vendors, the same two nouns arrived together inside the post-briefing window. Resilience cadence, confidence thresholds. They plotted it like radar returns. A hearing hits. Within 90 days, multiple contractors update confidentiality frameworks with confidence preservation or erosion language. Supplier handbooks adopt resilience cadence. Onboarding pages shift appendix to baseline. Across the river, our composites felt choreography. Day 2 wellness, Day 5 manager, Day 10 spouse. Pre-publication stuck on under sensitive review. Polygraph notes routed off ledger. The paper trail and the body temperature kept the same time. To keep themselves honest, they stayed inside public fences. Before/after diffs showed derivative insights and AERA updates. Confidence preservation, liquidated damages, and degradation events in BIERA revisions. Resilience cadence and spouse protocol in Sierra changes. Job postings that used to list contract drafting started asking for confidence preservation as a competency. A training title, behavioral_influence_outing_FC_final. Escaped a black box in a tooltip. Alone each is boring. Together, they're commits in a build. Whispers of AD floated for months, body folded into mind and money. Biomedical inputs turned into resilience. Scores, with voluntary, wearables edged toward access gating. They refused to print it as fact. Then the unsent resignation draft surfaced from the contracting tree, saved and never mailed. 3 bullets mapped the ladder: A. Derivative insight, B. Confidence pricing, C. Behavioral routing, and a 4th trailed off mid-word. D. Physiologic. The paragraph beneath read like intent, not lore. Integrate biometric baselines into resilience scoring. Sell it as optimization. Operationalize it as adjudication. They logged the timestamp hugging the airport week and left it on paper. Direction, not deployment. They tested edges with narrow, low-risk asks. Requests for contractor revisions that added spouse protocol language within defined windows drew polite circles. Agencies don't maintain spouse support phrases. Primes pointed to enterprise wellness initiatives. He asked internally for policy names authorizing AUX-only polygraph capture. The answer sang across buildings. AUX supports continuing evaluation. Policy names are internal and not responsive. That's the point. Guidance moves faster than policy, because policy wears a name tag. For viewers who want something they can put a finger on without a badge, they wrote 2 lines any cautious editor could print. Within 90 days of closed-door UAP briefings, multiple defense contractors added confidence preservation or erosion language to confidentiality terms. Within the same windows, onboarding pages across vendors adopted resilience cadence phrasing, archived by public crawlers. No theories, just clocks. He taped their translation beside the corkboard like a spec sheet. A is the scaffold, extend review to derivative insight, so process talk can be captured without naming programs. B is the wallet, price confidence, so you can enforce outcomes without alleging speech. C is the mind, choreograph behavior, move sensitive captures off ledger, route care as control. If D compiles, it's the body, physiologic inputs tucked under wellness, voluntary, until tied to access. She underlined the hinge that makes the letters more than clever labels, cadence. A slides in before the heat. B follows hearings. C pulses on a 90-day drumbeat after high-visibility windows. Every time, the same patterns and residues, identical phrasing across logos, training titles escaping pixels, partner bulletins echoing sensitive sector vigilance within a week. You don't need a memo that says shut them up when you can show a system that prices insistence on schedule. They weren't proving what the phenomenon is. They were proving what the meter does. And once the ABC ladder shows up in public artifacts, belief isn't the ask. Diffing is. The satellite incidents, infrastructure as leverage. While the contract ladder settled into boilerplate, the sky kept tapping the glass. Not lights, systems. Radar coherence where there shouldn't be any. A nuclear sensor chiming off schedule. A comms corridor turning to hiss for 8 seconds. Each time, 2 clocks started. One lived in operations, logs, sims, shift notes. The other lived in contracting, clauses, cadence, partner syncs. The second moved faster. Start on the coast. Controllers watched a target sit coherent across overlapping beams with matched jitter artifacts. Geometry that should collapse into a maintenance ticket and didn't. They escalated by the book. The tag fed the UAP window. Maintenance got a work order. Supervisors filed the shift report. 72 hours later, vendor portals tied to those arrays posted quiet updates labeled confidence review cadence, post-event hygiene. Inside 2 weeks, confidentiality frameworks for signal integrity labs in that region added confidence thresholds and resilience cadence. No email about the target. People signed a clause. At a nuclear site, a control rod test paused on a phantom echo. No hazard, no breach, just an alert that didn't match weather, wear, or operator error. Drills ran, paperwork cleaned. Outside the fence line, the market spoke in policy. The site contractor pushed a resilience bulletin bundling wellness links with a reminder that derivative insights remain subject to pre-publication review. A month later, engineers with log access saw retention packages add confidence conditions. You could still talk. It cost more to be heard. Over a southwestern corridor where training flights sprayed with commercial routes, pilots heard a white hiss roll across frequencies for 8 seconds. The FAA wrote a bland note and moved on. Primes wrote clauses. One vendor updated internal social policies. Avoid public engagement on operational anomalies. Route concerns through enterprise channels. Another widened pre-publication to include operational narratives associated with infrastructure events. It read like prudence. It functioned like a lid. We built a grid. Incidents on one axis, contract behavior on the other. After radar anomalies, nuclear hiccups, or comms hiss inside publicly known windows, vendor templates changed within 30 to 90 days, sometimes within weeks. This is where external partner liaison, financial vector sync, stops being a slide title. Banks don't track UAPs, they track sectors. When infrastructure twitches, models tighten around the people who touch it. Guidance whispers. Friction blooms. Inside the rooms, the ask after an incident was simple: time on deck. Logs, sims, traces. Instead, the first emails were wellness cadence and alignment prompts. A junior cryptanalyst pitched a sandbox to test how non-standard EM signatures might stress satellite comms protocols. Cheap, useful, measured. It never got funded. The same week, legal finalized a clause tying bonuses to maintenance of confidence thresholds during anomalous operational periods. Money moved. Curiosity waited. Microstories told truths the memos wouldn't. A radar controller with 20 years on scope borrowed a prepaid phone and asked a friend at a prime, "Did your board see what we saw?" The friend answered without a beat, "We saw the contracts move." He went back to the scope. The sky cleared. The tempo didn't. Procurement calendars started wearing the pattern in public. Sat/in for cadence, stubs popped up right after high-visibility briefings. Attendees were contract officers, compliance leads, and integrity partners. Agendas read the same: cadence, confidence, resilience. One included, Phase 3, broaden spouse protocol to infrastructure teams. The date hugged a regional grid flicker. Different systems. Same playbook. Pilots compared notes the way they always do, coffee and caution. A handful filed ASRS safety reports to NASA, careful to avoid speculation. Those reports are designed for sunlight. Within the quarter, a major contractor's confidentiality framework began requiring pre-publication review for operational narratives by employees in sensitive sectors. 2 suppliers mirrored the phrase inside 90 days. The cadence kept time. A ground station watched a reference clock feeding a satellite link drift for seconds, then snap back. Tickets closed. The contractor circulated partner packs, encouraging proactive outreach to financial compliance teams when resilience flags arise. Days later, a banker called a technician and said the line that translates the entire system: "Your file is fine." Something upstream isn't. Upstream meant models had ingested a phrase. Comms technicians saw dawn stutter to hiss and did what techs do: pulled logs, filed tickets, moved on. The same day, a benefits provider pushed a wellness webinar to families of critical infrastructure employees, hitting spouses in 3 cities with near-identical scripts. The behavioral influence appendix didn't care if the glitch was weather. It cared that the calendar said it was time to call. Aerospace telemetry teams watched internal wikis change tone. Pages about signal hygiene picked up a new footer. Employees are reminded that derivative insights related to operational anomalies may require pre-publication review. That footer appeared across vendors within the same 60-day window. We didn't need a leak to see the hand. We needed a diff. Meanwhile, confidence thresholds clarified, posts proliferated in portals connected to arrays that had just had a bad week. Supplier FAQs adopted resilience cadence language. Onboarding shifted appendix to baseline for teams closest to the edge. HR rolled out spouse protocol awareness to infrastructure units, as if it had always lived there. The visible record looked like care. The engine room, the AUX lane the composites kept running into, didn't have to show anything to sync the rest. A nuclear engineer said the quiet part with a tired smile. After a false positive, what we need is simulation budget and time. We get an email about how we're feeling. The week after, anomaly simulation funding slid to defer to Q4. Rev C updates stayed on schedule. We traced one closed-door brief about repeated sensor noise at a nuclear site against contract diffs, adding confidence preservation at 2 primes. The phrase migrated into a bank's internal bulletin. Heightened vigilance in sensitive sector employment segments inside the same week. The bank didn't need the why. It needed the when. People felt the when as autopilot turning into C agent and manual validation. Controllers wanted to know whether jitter artifacts across overlapping beams could be a software quirk. Procurement wanted to know whether resilience cadence had landed at Tier 1 and Tier 2 suppliers. Both questions matter. Only one moves within days. The point isn't that infrastructure incidents prove anything about the phenomenon. It's that they prove priority. After every twitch in national power, the first institutional reflex isn't understand the twitch. It's control the language and lanes around it. Rev C's behavioral choreography and the financial sync let managers surge control faster than teams can surge science. That's the market they've built. Uncertainty as currency, priced by confidence, enforced by cadence. The composites didn't need someone to say shut up. They watched how quickly portals learned new words. Confidence thresholds, resilience cadence, operational narratives, spouse protocol. They watched how quickly banks learned theirs, heightened vigilance, manual validation, throughput. They watched how those lexicons showed up within the same 90-day windows after events that weren't supposed to move markets at all. The meaning sits there plain. If you control contracts and cadence around infrastructure, you control who speaks credibly about the sky, the grid, and the line. You don't have to decide what an anomaly is to decide what it costs to describe it. And when the costs arrive on schedule, people wait for the quarter to close before they tell the truth. That's leverage disguised as hygiene. That's how an operating system wins time. The revelation, what the silence protects. Strip away the acronyms and the carpet, and what's left isn't a mystery, it's a meter. Uncertainty isn't a gap to close in this world. It's a resource to manage. If radar arrays, nuclear sensors, and comms corridors keep brushing the unexplainable, the entity that controls the cadence around those brushes controls budgets, careers, and the terms of public belief. That isn't a secret program, so much as a business model built from defaults. Modernization gave it cover. Zero trust, insider risk programs, AI anomaly detection, real upgrades every serious shop needs, became the frame that hides behavioral routing inside legitimate hygiene. Spouse protocol tucks under family resilience. AUX captures hide under continuing evaluation. Pre-publication throttles sit under domain sensitivity. Say best practice, and the playbook reads like care. Meanwhile, the triad hardened from slide to schedule. Risk cells got recurring blocks. Contract officers took short courses in confidence preservation. External partners set quarterly model syncs. The knobs tightened quietly. No threats, just bland phrases moving in unison. Resilience cadence, confidence thresholds, sensitive sector vigilance. Vocabulary did the work that memos used to do. On the ground, incentives rewired curiosity. Before you file a clean anomaly report, you scan your life for weak seams. Mortgage window in a month? Hold a week. Kids consult next Tuesday? Park the draft. Nobody orders delay. You teach yourself to sequence survival ahead of truth. That's not cowardice. That's the practical effect of a priced field. Inside the buildings, the calculus gets framed as ethics. They'll say they're averting harm, preventing spill, managing insider risk. They aren't wrong about the stakes. They're selective about who pays. Administrative discretion becomes a lever when it's yoked to money and mood. The visible record fills with humane notes, wellness, training, alignment, while the engine room moves origin signals through lanes no one has to show a reviewer. Care stands in for cause. Oversight opened a narrow window and hit glass. Congress carved lawful channels for UAP-related disclosures and carved exceptions to NDAs for reporting through those lanes. Inspectors general logged inquiries. Hearings put officials under lights. But channels protect the act, not the aftermath. Pre-publication still gates. AUX still routes. Banks still tighten when euphemisms land. Ask for policies and you'll meet guidance without a name tag. Ask for names and you'll meet the state secret's privilege before discovery begins. A historical review can say, truthfully, it found no official UAP-specific NDAs. That sentence holds if you're looking for a single document with that title in the right cabinet. It misses the ecosystem we can all see. Derivative insight clauses that pull process into review. Confidence pricing that ties money to mood. Behavioral appendices that script care into control. Partner bulletins that translate it into heightened vigilance the market digests in a week. You can tell a narrow truth and still miss the machine. So what's the machine protecting? Not a single hanger. A monopoly on meaning. If a phenomenon keeps nicking mission-critical systems, the first organization to define that risk sets the cost of everything adjacent. Hardware, software, staffing, contracts, timelines. Certainty isn't the prize. Custody is. Custody looks like cadence. After incident windows, rev-style updates proliferate. After high-visibility briefs, partner syncs convene. After public heat, alignment language thickens in portals. The fastest way to quiet a difficult truth isn't to attack it. It's to price it into later. Ask the analyst who passed clean and still lost her feeds. Passing mapped her. The system wasn't vetting honesty. It was sampling cost. Ask the engineer who chased a ratio and inherited a refinance in manual limbo and a 3-week C-agent loop. He didn't break a rule. He wandered into a field where rules set tolls. If you hunt illegality, you'll miss the shape. The brilliance is in alignment. Classification blocks light. Contracts price speech. Compliance manages behavior. Finance enforces tempo. Each piece is defensible alone. Together, they convert a witness into a variable that can be stabilized without any document saying shut up. That's the revelation. Silence doesn't need force when cadence can carry price. That's why the offsite mattered. They didn't invent a conspiracy. They harmonized defaults. Observation replaced surveillance. Resilience replaced pressure. Mission assurance replaced penalty. Ambient containment entered decks because it passes audits and still moves people. The risk cell wasn't a black op. It was an org function that learned to move through guidance faster than oversight could ask the first question. And yes, the rumor sits there like a future tense, the unsent line that said physiologic, and sketched biometric inputs folded into resilience scores, voluntary, until access depends on the ring on your finger. Even as a draft, it shows direction, body signals as model inputs, wellness as wrapper, guidance as engine. When bodies meter, voices don't need to be raised. Gates move quietly. Underneath all the euphemisms, the objective isn't to solve the unknown first. It's to own the runway to explanation. If you meter who speaks credibly, when they can speak, and what it costs to persist, you don't have to win the science. You win the calendar. Procurement cycles are clocks. Research budgets are clocks. Pre-pub queues, partner models, performance portals, clocks. Control time, and you control truth's chances. The human cost stays small on purpose. The engineer slid sideways into a safe lane and watched a pension banner like a pulse. The analyst kept working and stopped insisting. A counsel typed oath into a resignation draft, saved it, and came back in the morning to finalize spouse protocol language. None of it trends. All of it accumulates. So if the question is what the silence protects, the answer is a meter. One that converts destabilizing encounters into managed, priced events that never outrun the bureaucracy designed to domesticate them. Not because truth is inherently dangerous, but because unmetered truth moves money and authority on a schedule the patterned carpet rooms don't choose. And the leverage against it isn't a scoop. It's a ledger. Phrases, dates, frictions. The same words landing in the same order across buildings and banks within the same windows. When enough people can name the cadence in public, guidance starts to look like policy. Policy draws letters on letterhead. Letters slow metronomes. Slowed metronomes hand time back to science, and to anyone still, willing to log the pattern while the price hums. The cost of breaking the contract. There isn't a trapdoor moment. It's a ledger that starts updating the second you choose principle over prudence. You don't blow a whistle. You file a clean disclosure, decline the new addendum, and tell your manager you won't accept confidence pricing. You've honored SF312, stayed inside the law, and kept names out of it. The meter still starts. The first bill arrives as portfolio adjustments. A propulsion lead we followed received a lender's request for fresh employment verification, stamped with a phrase he'd never seen. Status, in realignment. Automated underwriting dropped to manual. Manual meant time. Time meant points and fees. A tax impound hiccup doubled for a cycle. His corporate card calibrated, down by a few $100s. A gas station decline turned into a midnight scramble. None of it illegal. All of it cumulative. 3 months later, he sold early and called it getting ahead of it. His spouse called it moving. Another version looks tidy on paper and mean in life. A program manager signed Rev B under protest, then declined the wellness plan after the appendix moved to baseline. The spouse support line called twice, then a third time, working the script about stability and resources. Concern at home turned into instruction. Don't rock the boat, not with the kids' calendar and the refi window. Arguments that started about tone became arguments about money. The separation agreement spent more ink on vesting schedules and clawback exposure than on anything human. The court form said irreconcilable differences. The difference was a clause that priced persistence. Quiet settlements fill the middle lanes. A materials tech accepted a package that kept his benefits and wrapped his voice. The non-disparagement looked standard. The addendum did the work. Don't characterize enterprise risk practices in a manner that could erode confidence. He asked counsel what that meant. Don't explain what happened. He signed, paid off a parent's medical bill, and stopped replying to colleagues who still had questions. He promised himself he'd speak later. Later never clears pre-publication. Sometimes the tag follows you into rooms that are supposed to be private. A lifestyle update pushes a form to your doctor. Boxes about stress and sleep. Your therapist writes a careful note, managing well. It enters AUX as support engagement. Weeks later, a credentialing board adds additional review and forces overnight notarizations for a renewal you've never struggled with. You meet the deadline by inches and learn the lesson that sticks. Paper can slow you without touching your rights. Careers don't break, they slope. A senior analyst requests a developmental rotation before someone gifts it. The title stays level, the floor changes. She checks the pension banner like a pulse and does work that can't get her in trouble. She tells herself the choice was hers, and it was like stepping sideways on a ledge because the person walking toward you won't stop. Colleagues bring coffee and stop tagging her in threads because tagging her now spends reputation. They aren't cowards. They're calibrated to a currency called confidence. There are bankruptcies. Not many. One began with a medical event that collided with a pre-authorization timing out and a benefits freeze. The claim paid eventually after the filing. The credit mark didn't. He never drew a straight line from anomaly to denial. He sketched timing and saw the curve. Some try to muscle through. A systems engineer refused spouse protocol, logged every wellness call, filed a reprisal complaint, and sat down with a congressional staffer. He won a letter from an inspector general stating his disclosure was protected and retaliation prohibited. He framed it on the wall of a rented apartment after selling the house he loved. The letter didn't change his access tier. It did change how he told the story to himself. Clawbacks and liquidated damages rarely arrive as a courtroom hammer. They arrive as decisions you don't take. You pass on a freelance contract that would let you write a process piece because the indemnity clause mirrors confidence erosion language, and outside counsel says it's survivable on paper and ruinous in practice. You decline a lawful interview because your refi clocks in 72 days, and you've learned what manual underwriting does when your name hits a transcript. You submit to pre-publication because you should and watch under sensitive review sit for a season. Silence becomes strategy. Strategy reads like consent. Money isn't the only price. It's momentum. A propulsion lead summed it in a line we underlined. I stopped moving forward. I started maintaining. Then he added what matters more than any clause. I still have my sequence. He meant dates and phrases, not a manifesto. Receipts he could point to when someone asked what it felt like inside a machine that never says its name. The social bill arrives last and lingers longest. Coffee invites thin. CC lines thicken. A manager saves you by moving you out of the heat. It preserves eligibility and costs purpose. People who believe you make kind, practical moves. They keep your badge alive and your voice small. That's the quiet genius of a priced field. It convinces good people to help you shrink. This playbook works when you stop trusting your own log, so the ones who endure write down exact words. Temporary realignment supports mission assurance. Prim entry not generated. AUX supports continuing evaluation. Heightened vigilance in sensitive sector employment. Preemptive financial mitigation. They timestamp TSA downgrades, bank manual validations, insurer throughput loops, and spouse calls that land within the same week. Then they compare notes with two people in other cities who don't know each other and watch the clocks rhyme. It doesn't unlock a door. It keeps you from believing you imagine the wall. Ask a clearance lawyer where relief lives and you'll hear the line that never changes. They don't have to prove you're wrong. They have to prove you're not worth the effort. Worth is measured in friction. Friction becomes policy when it repeats. And yet there's a seam they haven't priced. Memory. People tuck away the phrases in the windows, the 3-week gap between a non-deceptive assessment and a temporary realignment. The morning a bank called and a spouse script followed. The afternoon confidence thresholds appeared in a retention pack. They don't publish secrets. They pattern. They hand those patterns to friends with different badges who speak different acronyms. The machine runs on isolation. Patterns are the one thing it can't digest when enough of them surface at once. That's the cost. Not a single blow, but 100 small invoices that arrive on time. You can pay in money, access, purpose, or you can pay in patience and paper. The only bill that buys space is the ledger you keep while they keep the meter. The public's leverage, pattern recognition. This is where ordinary people get power without touching secrets. You track cadence, not content. Start with the vocabulary that keeps showing up in public places at the same times. Confidence preservation or confidence erosion, resilience cadence, behavioral support, derivative insights, heightened vigilance in sensitive sector employment. AUX supports continuing evaluation. When you see any of those phrases, on a contractor PDF, an onboarding page, a bank bulletin, an insurer FAQ, copy the exact wording and the date. You're not investigating people. You're logging weather. Build a tiny ledger. Columns, not paragraphs, date, actor, exact phrase, where you saw it, what happened next. A vendor updates its terms with confidence thresholds on March 14th. A bank notice citing heightened vigilance lands March 21st. Your friend across town gets manual validation on March 23rd. Alone, each is a shrug. Together, they form a window you can point to without naming a soul. Timelines beat theories. Closed-door briefings and committee windows are on public calendars. Use them as anchors. Watch the 30 to 90-day period after those dates. Do contractor PDFs add resilience cadence? Do supplier FAQs mention spouse protocol awareness? Do onboarding pages move an appendix into baseline? Archive each page the day you find it. Public crawlers do this for free. If the page changes later, your snapshot is the receipt. Share patterns, not documents. Never post chain of custody, program codes, or anything born in a vault. Post what any reader can verify. Before / after diffs, where derivative insights appears in one quarter and confidence preservation shows up the next. 3 companies adopting the same phrase inside the same window. A bank bulletin that mirrors a contractor's word choice within a week. 10 small confirmable wins beat 1 risky claim. Crowdsource without building a target. Think neighborhood watch, not registry. 3 to 5 people in a city, each keeping the same ledger format. Meet in person. Phones off. Bring only what you'd be comfortable losing. 1 person who loves version diffs. 1 who reads contracts. 1 who knows digital hygiene. If a group goes dark, the pattern still compiles across other groups. Make friction legible. Capture euphemisms in the wild exactly as said. Manual underwriting, throughput verification, identity incongruence, temporary limit calibration, see agent. Write the timestamp and the actor. When 2 other people in different cities see the same phrase inside the same 3-week span, you've turned a private annoyance into a public signal. Teach a light discipline in-house. If you run a team near the edge, telemetry, materials, power, give your people a 2-minute pattern brief. Write down exact words used in any support call. Note TSA status drops. Copy peer feedback phrases that feel off. Keep a date ledger. Don't speculate. Don't move documents. Don't guess intent. This is about rhythm, not motives. Publish like engineers. Tables over adjectives. Version diffs over vibe. Within 60 to 90 days of X hearing, why contractors added confidence preservation to confidentiality terms is a sentence a cautious reader can test. Add 2 links, an archived before and an archived after. If a page is edited, your snapshot becomes the anchor anyone can stand on. Build a conversion layer for oversight. Staffers don't have time for lore. Give them 1 page that ties public revision logs to hearing dates to vendor language changes. No classified nouns, just dates and phrases. Hand them a clean request template they can reuse. Provide headers and calendaring for documents using behavioral influence or resilience cadence between dates. Headers are administrative artifacts. They're harder to deny without explaining why. Protect people who still badge in. Strip metadata from anything you post. Redact names that aren't essential. Avoid room numbers and internal meeting titles if they aren't already public. This machine recruits by making examples. Don't give it candidates. Sequence your finances before you escalate. Freeze credit. Split savings across institutions that don't share integrity partners. Close on the mortgage before you submit a process-only piece to pre-publication. Set up a buffer account that never touches your direct deposit. These aren't acts of bravery. They're timing, and timing is armor in a system that prices insistence. Calibrate your expectations about channels. Use pre-publication review for any process-adjacent writing. Keep the receipt and the date. If it stalls under sensitive review, you've got a clock you can show a reporter who values prudence. Use whistleblower lanes for lawful disclosures. Pair every filing with your ledger, so the aftermath has context when your access doesn't come back on schedule. Expect fog, not fire, in response. Identical denial paragraphs are a tell. Stack them side by side and circle the matching commas. Publish. The pattern of refusal itself. It's often the most honest artifact institutions leave behind. If you need a starter kit, keep it to 5 lines. Lexicon targets. Confidence preservation/erosion, resilience cadence, derivative insights, behavioral support. AUX supports continuing evaluation, heightened vigilance in sensitive sector employment. Calendar anchors, hearing dates, closed-door brief windows, ARO or IG milestones. Diff targets, contractor confidentiality PDFs, supplier FAQs, onboarding pages, internal policy portals that became public via archives. Partner echoes, bank and insurer notices adopting matching phrases inside the same quarter. Friction ledger, TSA downgrades, manual underwriting, insurer throughput loops with timestamps. Keep your tone boring. Boring survives. A cautious middle will stick with you if they can confirm every sentence without calling a friend. The goal isn't to prove what the phenomenon is. It's to show how the meter moves around it. When enough people can recognize confidence preservation as a price tag and resilience cadence as a clock, guidance starts to look like policy in daylight. Policy attracts letters. Letters slow metronomes. Last, preserve memory with precision. Write the exact words. Temporary realignment supports mission assurance. Prim entry not generated. AUX supports continuing evaluation. Preemptive financial mitigation. Partner model alignment. Write the times they arrived. Compare across cities. When the same phrases land in the same order after the same kind of windows, you don't need a leak to tell a true story. You need a ledger, and a few friends who keep one too. The final mini cliffhanger, the unsent letter. Framing note. What follows is a plausible depiction of what such a document could contain, based on direction implied by public residues and consistent lexicon. It illustrates intent and trajectory. It is not presented as a specific document we obtained. It lived in a drafts folder 2 doors down from the patterned carpet room. The file name was ordinary, notes_resignation_v4.docs. Caught when a temp IT admin imaged a user profile after a sudden transfer and forgot to wipe the cache path from a ticket. The domain matched the contracting tree we've already traced in public residues. The timestamp hugged the same Airport Week window where resilience cadence started showing up in vendor updates. He opened it expecting anger. It read like a confession wrapped in compliance. To whom it may concern, the first line began, careful as if the writer already knew silence was safer. Then 3 bullets, plain and specific. Rev A, derivative insight. All conclusions drawn from exposure to sensitive programs are protected for pre-publication review, regardless of novelty. Rev B, confidence pricing. Monetary recoveries tied to measurable degradation in enterprise confidence. Rev C, behavioral routing. Partner protocols include spouse stability, wellness cadence, and AUX-only captures. He stopped at the 4th, Rev D, physiologic. A sentence left half-born. Below sat a paragraph the author never sent. We were told to thread the needle between care and control. We built a loom. The next revision integrates biometric telemetry, voluntary wearables, and clinical baselines into resilience scores. Voluntary becomes gating when tied to access. We will call it optimization. It will function as adjudication, not rumor, direction, in the hand that drafts the verbs. Then the signature without a signature. As liaison for contracting, I have prepared language to harmonize D with existing wellness frameworks. He checked hidden properties. The username fragment matched the tag we'd already seen in public change logs, and in the chain of custody template residue. Same fingerprints on evidence paperwork and clause rollouts. Human bled through the policy. I believed we were preventing shocks, the author wrote. I see now we're pricing them into people. The last line felt like a hand finding a rail. I can't square this with my oath. Save. No send. No print. A life paused mid-syllable. He traced the hallway where that person must have walked. Badge readers blinked for someone else. The cafeteria scrape of a chair sounded too loud. Ordinary sounds do that when you're holding proof that a loop can tighten around bodies and still be called care. He didn't email the file. He copied the bullets longhand, folded the page twice, and slid it behind his burner's back cover. In a park, the reporter listened while he read. She wrote on a legal pad, underlined physiologic, and didn't say it out loud. They couldn't claim deployment. They could show direction, body signals as inputs, wellness as wrapper, guidance as engine. The date stamped near the offsite made the floor tilt. They agreed on the line they'd actually print. Here's what such a draft would contain if the pipeline kept going. No names. No file. Just the pattern's next step, in the pattern's own language. Impact. Moved without a headline. A junior hire in a telemetry unit started onboarding, where the appendix wasn't an add-on. It was baseline. No incident required, just default pressure sold as resilience. The half-line told them where pressure could go next. Wrists and chests, straps and rings. Voluntary, until access depends on a number. He called the analyst on the quiet phone and read the bullets and the half-line. She went still, then said the part they both knew. If they can meter bodies, they don't have to raise their voice. He folded the page again. They had the building. They still didn't have the room. But a draft from the hand that writes defaults can be louder than a signature. It means the architects are uneasy enough to type oath and stop. Uneasy people miss a redaction pixel. They misaddress a calendar invite. They save a letter they can't send. We know the building. We don't yet know the room. Now we know the hand. They didn't need a gag. Contracts, cadence, and care turned truth into a bill paid in time, money, and access. If you've seen the pattern, phrases, dates, frictions, log it safely and share only what's public. Subscribe and watch next as we track how Rev D shadows wellness programs and vendor terms. Your notes might be the thread that finally names the room.